Welcome to Lady Mythos. Tonight, the rain has a long memory. It walks the dark hills in soft boots, treading where cattle paths curl and hawthorn hedges lean like old women listening at the door. The peat fire is already lit. It gives that shy orange that doesn't show off, but warms the bones the way a good word does. Quietly, all at once, from the marrow outward. Come in. Brush a sleeve across your shoulders. Shake the bright beads from your fringe. Settle close. There is room for everyone near the hearth. The bench creaks in a friendly way as you sit. The woven rushes smell faintly of river and last summer's sun. Breathe in with me. 3 slow breaths. The way the old people said a story ought to begin. 1. For the road behind you. 2. For the roof above you. 3. For the fire between us. Chapter 1. Brothers of Word and Work. The Dagda and Ogma of the Tuatha Dé Danann. There, you are here, and so are they, the Tuatha Dé Danann, glimmering on the far bank of time. And among them, 2 brothers who are not brothers as mortals count, but akin by power and presence, by the way their gifts hold the world like 2 hands joining round a bowl. One is Ogma, sometimes called Ogmios, to those who like the taste of Greek on the tongue. You'll know him by the light in his eyes and the lift in his shoulders, the look of a man who has carried great stones and found the weight agreeable. His hair is the colour of wet bark, his voice the colour of warm bread, and when he speaks it is said that chains of bright gold slip from his mouth and ring themselves gently to the ears of his listeners. Not chains to bind by fear, no. Chains to bind by love, by attention, by that sudden, delicious feeling that what is being said is exactly what your heart hoped to hear and had not yet learned to pronounce. The other is the Dagda, the good god. Not good as in spotless, for his tunic is patched and the laces of his boots are chewed by dogs, and the belly beneath his belt has the contented swell of a man who sits long at tables. But good, as in good at everything. He is druid and builder, father and fool in the holy sense, harper of 3 tunes, and keeper of the cauldron that never empties. There is a great club, too, slung as if it were only a shepherd's stick, though one end of it knocks the life from anything it kisses, and the other end beckons that same life back with a tap, as tender as a mother waking a child for school. If Ogma is word carved into air, the Dagda is bread placed into hands. If Ogma is law told well, the Dagda is the proof that law is aimed not at punishment, but at plenty. For where there is enough, there is peace. Tonight, we find them in a hall of quiet harps. The hall lives where the hills fold into each other like blankets, and a river writes its name over and over on the dark fields. The door is a simple plank door, its latch smooth from the familiar push of friend after friend. The rafters wear cobwebs like lace. From the roof hangs a row of apples, kept through winter, each one giving a whisper of sweetness to the air. The benches shine with the memory of 1,000 sitters. A hound sighs, heavily asleep in the corner. The rain plays its fingertips along the thatch. The wind, considerate as an old neighbour, keeps the door from slamming. On the centre half, peat smoulders and flames flare up where resin found a thin place in the turf. A crane arm swings a black-bellied pot over the fire. What boils there is barley made plump with river water and the fat of a deer, with chopped roots and a sheaf of herbs the Dagda crushed between his hands until they confessed their green perfume. The steam smells like a promise kept. It makes the inside of your nose feel new again. Listen. A wooden ladle knocking the rim like a slow metronome. That's the Dagda, stirring. His hair has escaped its thong and curls about his face. His cheek is flushed with heat. Every now and then, he tastes the brew, not because he doubts it, but because tasting is one of the ways to say grace while the food is still becoming itself. He drops in a fist of oats, a spoon of honey, a pinch of salt. He stirs again, humming. It is not yet a tune. It's the contented, formless humming of a large being pleased by small successes. Across from him, on the other bench, Ogma leans forward with a stick, and the absorbed look of a boy drawing in the sand while the tide decides itself. He is inscribing lines of Ogham on the packed earth floor, a vertical stem and the keen slanting ticks that lean from it like birds on a winter branch. The marks are simple to look at and endless to ponder. They come out of the names of trees, birch and rowan and alder and ash, and the shapes the wind makes when it speaks through them. The first human letters of Ireland. Though if you ask Ogma whether they are human or river-made or bird-spoken, he will rest his chin on his fist and say, with a smile, yes. He draws in silence until the Dagda, who cannot let silence last longer than its proper usefulness, fills a bowl and slides it along the bench. The bowl travels with a thin sound like a shell being drawn over sand. Ogma's hand finds it without looking. He eats, slow. The steam kisses his face. "Brother," he says at last, "listen to this." He touches the floor with his stick. It begins with a standing thing, a spine. From that, the world grows outward. Everything has a spine if you look. A tree, a story, a promise. The marks are only branches growing from that first upright breath. The Dagda snorts his appreciation, an affectionate, amused sound, half laugh, half cow. "Aye," he says, eyes bright. "And what do the branches say?" "They say," Ogma answers, pleased that he was asked, "that what is heard may be held. That thought can cross a hill and arrive as itself on the other side. That we can lay speech down like stepping stones across a river of years." The Dagda stirs, frowns, tastes again. Stones across a river are good. so a grandmother can cross without wetting her hem, and a child can balance without falling. But you know this. A man cannot eat sterns. You write your branches. I will fatten them with barley. Ogma's eyes laugh. He takes another spoon, watching the surface heal after the bowl's wooden lip. Who would argue with a pot that never empties? Only a fool. And even he will argue better with a full mouth than an empty one, the Dagda says, and the hound in the corner thumps its tail in hearty agreement, still asleep. For a while they do not speak. The rain leans in, listening. Something creaks in the roof and settles again. From the shadows by the door, a cat materializes, black along the back and milk white under the chin. It watches the ladle, the way a starling watches a beetle. The Dagda, who respects appetite wherever he finds it, flicks a flake of venison to the flagstones. The cat eats as if doing the hall a favour. "Tell me a thing," says the Dagda, tilting the pot off the fiercest part of the fire, so the stew can think about its life choices. "These marks you make, will they keep a man faithful to his word?" Ogma looks up, and the gold chains of his speech glint around the room, easy and invisible, linking bench to bench. "Faithfulness is a road walked by feet," he says. But yes, marks help. The way a notch in a staff helps a shepherd remember the days and the lambs. "Good," the Dagda says, "because people forget, even those who mean well. And forgetfulness, when it sits too long, becomes hunger." There is a story there, and you can feel it. The way you feel a knuckle of root in the soil before your spade hits it. Ogma hears it too. He rests the stick along the letters and turns his face toward the old god. "What hunger do you mean, today?" The Dagda rubs the heel of his hand against his beard. "Not only belly hunger," he says. "This island is beginning to starve for fairness." The tribute grows heavy. Music is quiet where it should be wild. Fires are counted. Gatherings are watched. The Fomorians measure the breath of a cow as if it were theirs to tax. He does not spit into the fire. It is not a spitting subject. It is an oath subject. He sets the ladle down with care. The cat lifts its head, curious, the way cats grow curious at the meet point of silence and resolve. The hound snores like a low drum. Ogma's stick makes a new mark on the earth that is not a letter, but will be remembered by the floor like one. "So," Ogma says softly, "we will need both, bread and binding, barley and branches. Your pot, my signs." He smiles, and there is tiredness there, and love. "Between us, we will make a road that even a frightened man may walk." The Dagda's laugh comes back, late but warm. "And we will feed him on the way," he says, so that when he arrives, his anger does not shake his hand. They eat together then, the way brothers do who do not need to check whether the other wants more. The Dagda's hand rests on the pot's belly, as if feeling a child move. Ogma's thumb idly straightens the stick until it aligns with the line of letters. A quiet joy in rightness. Now, if you like, we can step into a memory while they eat. Stories do this. The way the sea lays one wave over another, without losing track of either. It was not this night, but a night much like it when Ogma first learned how words might lift a spear from a hand. There were two bands, cousins in blood, but not in patience, circling each other on a grey morning, with that particular stubbornness that makes men dumb. The quarrel was over a cow. Of course a cow. A good brindled one with a clever face. But the true quarrel lived beneath the cow, down where pride makes its burrow and will not be smoked out. Ogma went alone, as if to a quiet well. He set down his spear, deliberately, like a man removing his boots before entering a church. And he began, not with orders, not with boasts, but with a story about a field where a certain boy had fallen asleep in the grass and been found by a certain father, who carried him home on his back, laughing, though the boy was heavy and the day was hot. He never named the boy, but of course the men recognized the father's laugh. He told how the father had fallen and skinned his knee, and how the boy had cried as if the knee were his own. He spoke of such ordinary tenderness that the men forgot to lift their arms and instead listened, their mouths thinking about smiling, and their hearts thinking about kneeling down and cutting bread. And when he had finished, they did not remember the exact words, only the shape of them. The way a hill remembers the shape of a cloud after the cloud has gone. The brindled cow, who all the while had been eating dandelions with a pointed air of purpose, lifted her head, chewed, and wandered over to the one man whose knee had that old scar he covered with jokes. She licked his sleeve. He blinked. Everyone laughed, but gently. It was a very small miracle, and therefore fit to stand beside very large ones, without shame. Ogma took the men's silence and looped it, one ear to the next, with his bright chains, binding them to the part of themselves that could still be moved by the memory of being carried. When they went home that day, each went with fewer enemies and more nephews. Back in the hall, the Dagda listens to this told again. He loves the tale and has heard it often, but never grows bored with it, the way a river never tires of the reflection of the moon. He wipes the bowl with his thumb. He licks his thumb. He nods. Words, he says, with satisfied gravity, are also a stew. And stew, Ogma says, just as solemn, is also a speech. They grin at each other like boys. The harp Uaithne leans against the Dagda's bench, its carved head like a patient bird, its strings dim as spider silk in the firelight. He cannot keep his hands off it for long. Music is as necessary to him as salt. He reaches for it now and draws it across his knee with the straightforward reverence of a baker turning out a loaf. The wood has that hum you can feel in your teeth. The Dagda lays his palm along the strings, and for a breath, everything in the room seems to listen inward to itself. Hounds and colds, and rain, and men. There are 3 tunes, he says, as if to the cat, as if to the rain. And all other tunes are children of these. There is the tune that raises laughter. Laughter not as mockery, but as unknotted breath. There is the tune that calls the right tears, the ones that rinse the mind and leave it flowering. And there is the tune that brings sleep in its arms, like a woman carrying a drowsy child. He does not play them yet. He only names them. And the naming itself changes the air. The way the word bread makes a room warmer, even before the loaf arrives. He lifts his hand and glances at Ogma. After, he suggests. After, Ogma agrees, because there is one more thing to say while eyes are still bright. He stands and crosses to the door and opens it to the night. The rain smells clean. The darkness does not peer in. It simply receives his looking kindly. Ogma lifts the stick and writes the first Ogham strokes on the lintel. Not to keep anyone out, but to invite them in as themselves. Birch for newness, rowan for protection, alder for bridges, ash for spine, yew for remembering. Each mark is a prayer without the fuss of a prayer. He says, for the door to hear, let those who come hungry find a hand to take the bowl. Let those who come angry find a word that is a chair, that they may sit down inside their own breath. Let those who come proud find a mirror that does not flatter, yet does not lie. The Dagda's large face softens. He nods to the lintel, as if it were an old friend returned from a long walk.
Good,
he says. Now feed the words. They eat again. They pour a little on the stones for the house, a swallow for the corner where draughts collect, a sip for the threshold, where the world turns in and out. They place a bowl by the door for any traveller who comes after midnight, shy of knocking. The cat curls its tail around its feet and blinks, and pretends not to watch everything with intense intelligence. Do you hear the river outside? Busy with its own going. It keeps its old promise to the sea. Always, every night, no matter who wins which battle. The river remembers the Boyne and Bowen's bright white rush, the way knowledge foamed up and ran, and the land learned to listen. But that is for another chapter. Tonight we stay in the hall and let the rain's hands comb our hair smooth. Tell me, Ogma says, and his voice has lowered with the hour. How did you come by the cauldron that never empties? Some say you made it. Some say it made you. The Dagda thinks, and when he thinks, his eyebrows tilt like gulls riding a wind in different directions. It was given, he says at last, but the giving was a work. There was a winter where no one laughed except by mistake, and I walked the island with a spoon and a sack, and asked at every door for the scraps of joy that had fallen that year. I put in the sack the last crumbs from feasts eaten months before, the smell of babies after sleep, the squeak that leather makes when the belt is tightened for a good day's work, the joke an old man remembered from his father and could not retell without crying. I put in the sack the hum a woman makes when washing a bowl. I put in the sack the way a cow's ear twitches when you say her name kindly. At last the sack was heavy but not full, and my arms were tired, and I sat down beside a blackthorn hedge to rest. There a rook came and scolded me for a miser, and stole from me not joy, but the habit of measuring it. When I stood, I found I was lighter, and the sack was lighter, and I could walk faster. I brought it to the hearth of this hall and poured it into the pot. Since then, what is given to the pot returns as more. It is not a magic of greed. It is the magic of return. Ogma listens, with his head bent, the way a man listens to the rain naming the roof. So, he says, what we feed the pot is fed back to us. What we hoard turns to stone in the mouth. That is the taste of it, the Dagda agrees cheerfully. And there are enough stones out on the hills for any who prefer them. They smile at each other, and in the pause, a small knock touches the door. It is late, and the knock is polite, the way a fox is polite. Cautious, ready to run if the world grows sharp. Come, the Dagda calls, voice soft as a blanket being shaken out. The door opens to a figure soaked to mid-thigh, hair straggled and eyes rimmed red from wind. A herdswoman, by her staff, and by the way she puts herself to the side immediately, as if to be less of a bother to the furniture. She says her name low, and tells them she has lost a calf to the dark, and perhaps to the Fomorian watchers who have been seen counting the heads that belong to other people. The Dagda is already setting a bowl in her hands. Ogma is already setting a hand, light, on her shoulder, in a way that says, you are safe from being questioned hard. Eat, the Dagda says. If a calf has been taken, you will be steadier for stew, and steadiness is what calves return to. She eats, and you can see the line of her back soften, as if someone had untied a knotted rope between her shoulders. Ogma sits beside her and speaks low, not at her, but with her. He asks her the names of the cows, and she says the names. Do not smile. Names matter. He asks which one tells jokes by the way she flicks her tail. There is always one. He listens until the room around them is warm with her herd. When she has finished eating, he draws a little Ogham on the rim of her bowl with the last smear of broth, just a few ticks, blessings that will wash away when she washes the bowl. But not before they have said what they came to say. Protection. A bridge. A remembering. The Dagda pulls his harp close. "I will play the middle tune, then," he says. "The one that makes room for a clean grief. Not a grief that grows moss and feeds nothing, but the good, bright grief that clears the eyes and lets the feet see where they must go." He plays. The sound rises like mist from a river meadow at first light. It is not grand. It does not demand. It invites. The herdswoman's breath catches and then steadies. 1 tear, 2. Fall and are wiped with the back of the hand the way countrywomen have always done it. The hound sighs, turning on its other side as if to save the ribs from too much goodness. The cat washes a paw with great concentration, which is how cats grant privacy. Ogma leans his shoulder against the doorpost and listens, the way a man listens to a story he already believes. When the tune finishes, the room does not rush to fill the silence. The silence is allowed to be itself. Then, the Dagda clears his throat. The sound is like a small thunder far away and nods towards the door. "Heifers come home to warmth. Go on now," he tells the woman, "and take this." He reaches not to the corner where coin might be kept, but to the hearth, and ladles a heavy lump of hot barley into a folded cloth. "Hold it to your belly under the cloak on the path. It will tell your fear it can rest. When you reach the fields, call the calf by the name you told us, and promise him oats when he's bold enough to be found. If Fomorian eyes are watching, they will see a woman confident as weather. Weather is not trifled with." She goes, blessing their shadows and their ancestors. The door shuts softly, and the rain sounds louder for a moment, as if remarking on her courage. "You help with your hands," Ogma says fondly. "I help with my mouth." "You help with your listening," the Dagda corrects. Mouths are only doors for a listening heart to step through wearing boots. They settle again. The pot's skin trembles, thinking of boiling, and then decides against it. The night leans into the late hours, those kind ones that look like the back of a swallow and smell like iron and wet earth. "Play the last tune now," Ogma suggests, voice comfortable as wool. The sleepers in the corners are ready to be told what they wanted to do anyway. The Dagda smiles, and it's the gentle smile of a man who has won many friendly arguments with sleep, and is happy to lose this one. He lays his left hand along the strings, as if settling a child, and plucks with his right. The sleep tune is not a melody so much as a law, written in soft ink. It finds the spine and tells it may soften. Finds the jaw and tells it may hang a little open without shame. Finds the eyes and tells them the world will be there upon waking, and does not need gazing at for safekeeping. The smoke in the rafters makes a long, contented ribbon. The hound's paws twitch. Running in a field it loved when it was young, and loves still in dreams. The cat decides the Dagda's foot is a mountain range of exceptional interest, and curls there. Outside, the river, who is nobody's fool, slows itself just enough to listen, while still going where rivers must. Before his own eyes slip closed, Ogma rises one more time and goes to the door. He touches the Ogham on the lintel with his fingertips, the way some kiss a stone that has been good to them. Birch, rowan, alder, ash, yew, he murmurs. Newness, protection, bridge, spine, memory. And for each he breathes a single breath into the grain of the wood, as if every letter deserves its own fair weather. He looks out into the dark and says to it the way one speaks to a friend. Not tonight, trouble. Tonight is for sleeping. When he returns, the Dagda has let the harp lean against the bench again and has covered the pot with its oak lid. The lid is smooth where many hands have smoothed it. A lid that knows the topography of comfort. He pats it as you would a good horse. He pats the bench beside him and Ogma sits. And there is a little laughter, because they are grown men sitting like boys who have been told once that sitting together is better luck than sitting apart. It is, always. Tomorrow, the Dagda says into the quiet, we will measure the meadow behind the hall and see if the ground means to be an oat field or a clover field. And perhaps we will sharpen the club, both ends. Hospitality is a blade that must be kept bright. Tomorrow, Ogma agrees. I will carve the first set of letters into yew slats for the children, the very littlest ones, so they will think of writing as something that grew up with them, and not something that arrived later and asked to be served. They do not say, if the Fomorians come, or when the levy is called, or how deep the winter will be. Those things are real, but they are not lords in this hall. In this hall, the lords are stew and harp, word and work, brothership. The sleep tune keeps playing even though the Dagda's hands are still. That is the way with certain good music. It goes on inside the wood, and inside the bones of the room, and inside your own chest where, surprise, you have been keeping a harp all these years without noticing. Let your eyelids lower. Let the rain count for you. A soft abacus on the roof. 1, 2, 3, and again. Let the smell of barley and venison, herbs and honey, fill the part of you that worries, and ask it politely to lie down. Curl your toes inside your socks, the way a cat settles its paws beneath its chest and disappears into warmth. The hall of quiet harps breathes once more, and then everything in it settles at the same time, as if the house has become a body that knows how to sleep. The last thing you notice before drifting is Ogma's stick where it rests. Its tip touching the first line of the first letter, and the Dagda's harp, leaning with perfect trust, and the pot, full as always, even with the lid on, because the promise of enough is itself a kind of food. And so chapter 1 closes its eyes. Word and work keep watch. The brothers are here. Chapter 2, Ogma's first lines. The birth of Ogham writing in Celtic myth. Morning comes in on quiet feet, the kind that do not wake a house all at once, but touch each room softly, as if asking permission. The rain is thinner now, turned to a mist that wears the hedges like a shawl. Smoke unbraids itself from the roof of the hall, and the river, still faithful, carries its low talk past the door. The fire is not loud yet, only a red memory of last night's brightness. The Dagda has been up with the grey of dawn, shifting embers, setting the cauldron to a thinking simmer. He moves with the soft clatter of a man who knows where every bowl is kept by heart and by hand. On the bench, Una, the harp, rests like a sleeping bird. It knows its day will come, but not yet. Ogma wakes, the way certain trees wake. The stretch happens from inside outward, and nothing is forced. He sits, wraps a cloak about his shoulders, and looks toward the door, as if listening for the line the dawn will offer him first. On the hearthstone, the stick from last night lies where he left it, its tip kissed by ash. Birch, Ogma says softly, to no one and to everyone. We will begin with birch. He stands and steps to the threshold where last night he scratched the first marks on the lintel. Outside, a yew sapling waits in the earth, planted seasons ago where the path rounds its shoulder toward the river. It's still a child of a tree, but yew is old from the beginning. The Dagda brings a small basket, shavings, a new yew slat, a small bone knife polished smooth by many fingers, and a little honey folded into oats for a worker's breakfast. I thought your mouth might want something to do while your hands are busy, he says. Ogma laughs under his breath. My mouth always wants to help. He takes the yew slat, balances its weight in his palm. This will do, he murmurs. Let us make the first set that children can hold without fear. They go outside. The morning is a thin silver, and under it the fields show their green like something remembered from a dream. Birds fuss in the hedges, as if discussing the day's arrangement of worms. Ogma sits on a low stool near the door. The Dagda sits on an upturned bucket and eats the worker's oats, happy as a lord and looking like a farmhand. Speak your plan aloud, the Dagda says, chewing with honest enthusiasm. We'll carve fuse, strokes leaning from a stem, Ogma says, Each will carry a sound and the memory of a tree. The stem is the world's spine. The notches are the way breath leans toward meaning. We'll begin with birch, Beth, for beginnings, for fresh bark and clean hope. Then Luish, the rowan, for keeping harm at the hedge. Then fern, alder, for bridges and waterwork. Then sail, willow, for sorrow made useful. Then neon, ash, for the standing thing. 5 to start, 5 fingers, 5 doors, the Dagda nods as if counting. 5 loaves, 5 oaths, 5 steps to a floor that doesn't give underfoot. Ogma sets the bone knife against the yew. He does not cut yet. He lays his hand first along the slat and speaks the kind of word that isn't for understanding, but for smoothing. You, old mother, lend us your patience. We are only shaping what you already grew. Then he begins. The knife enters the wood with a small sound like a note held in a throat. A central stem is scored, a straight, steady line, as if the yew itself stood and breathed. From it, Ogma cuts one small notch to the right. Breathe. He holds it toward the light, and the light seems to accept it. Birch, he says again. The doors opened. The first steps. The washing away smoke and keeping sweetness. The Dagda swallows oats and says, good, as if he has tasted the letter and approves its seasoning. Another notch joins the stem. Lewis, Rowan. A ward at the threshold. Red buried shield against the uninvited. Ogma feels into the cut the way a musician feels into the second note of a tune. What wants to follow what? Fern, alder. He lays the notch with care. For the places where water meets work. For the sound a bridge makes before the first foot crosses it. Sail, willow, the river's companion, the soft hanger of grief that teaches hands to weave baskets, and minds to flex where they would snap. Neon, ash, the standing thing, a token for spines and spears and mast trees. He breathes. That is a handful, he says, and a hand may hold it. From the path come the sounds of small feet. Children, who have learned already that if you come by the hall early, you are likely to be fed, and also told something that makes the morning feel like a secret you were born to keep. The first is a girl with hair the colour of chestnuts left in old leaves. She has her little brother by the sleeve. Behind them, 2 boys carry a curious hen like a queen on a litter, which the hen accepts as her due. At the last comes a grandmother, not because she is a child, but because she likes to sit in the corner and remember the answers faster than the questions. Come, the Dagda tells them. There's porridge where porridge needs to be, and a story growing from a stick. They settle. The children's knees make that small scuffing sound that always sounds like the beginning of a feast. The hen is persuaded to admire the hearth from a dignified distance. Ogma holds up the ewe slat. Do you see these little strokes? They are paths your mouths can walk. When you walk them, they carry your thought across the hill, and it arrives at another ear still wearing its own shoes. The chestnut-haired girl leans forward, fearless in the way of children who have been listened to often. What is that one? She asks, touching the topmost single notch. Beth, Ogma says. It tastes like the beginning of a breath. Say it, and feel where your tongue lays its head. Be. Be, the children say. Not together, togetherness will come later. But each in the particular music of a newly awake voice. Good, says Ogma. Birch is for beginning, for broom-swept thresholds, for bread dough that listens. Birch is for brave first steps. Louise, he continues, is rowan. Say L like your tongue is a boat sliding alongside a bank. The children try it, and one boy makes his L round as a berry, and is very pleased. Fern, says Ogma. Alder. F is the sound of a kettle thinking, of breath through reeds. Try it near your lip and see how soft it can be without going out. They do, and someone laughs when his lip tickles. Sail, willow, S, is a path a snake has drawn on sand. It doesn't need hurrying. Let it go as long as it likes and it will still be itself. Neon, ash, N, is the hum of yes when the yes is quiet. Feel it in the nose, as if your face were a little harp. The grandmother hums her N and the walls approve. The room has changed. Not because of magic that bends the air, but because attention has made a hearth on every face. Ogma sees it and bows his head a little. The Dagda sees it and ladles porridge as if to keep the new fire fed. Marks, Ogma says, returning to the ewe, are not bosses. They are companions. They walk beside your memory and carry the end of your basket when it is heavy. He scrapes another light stem onto a fresh bit of wood and sets the 5 first notches again, this time slower, naming them like children blessed at a door. Beth, Louise, Fern, Sail, Neon. The hen, who has been considering the meaning of education, lays an egg under the bench. The children receive this as a direct vote of confidence. From beyond the hedge, a hollow horn sounds. Not alarm, not threat, but the gathering call used by farmers when a task is better with many hands. The Dagda tips his head. The meadow waits, he says. We promised it yesterday. Ogma nods. Take them then, he tells the Dagda. Show them where the oats want to be. And I'll stay with the slats and the smallest mouths. The Dagda stands, hoists a spade like a king lifts a scepter, and the children, except the smallest two and the grandmother, spill out into the morning, following his big, cheerful shadow toward the field that needs deciding. Ogma remains by the door with the ewe and the bone knife. and the two little ones who have crumbs on their chins like runes the Dagda has secretly written there. He turns the slat in the light and says softly, "There are more to carve." But 5 is enough to begin a bridge. And a bridge, he adds, is how a day becomes a story. When the bustle of small boots has faded down the track, quiet returns like a cat that knows it is loved. The two littlest children sit cross-legged, their attention bright and soft in equal parts. The grandmother settles where the dawson touches her knees. Ogma lays a new slat on his lap. "We will set the second hand," he says. 5 more. Another way the mouth can walk. His knife touches wood. The stem stands. "H," he says, "is not a letter in the trees, but a breath we give to them to help them along when the hill rises." He shows how a stroke leans and how a whisper of air pushes the sound forward without breaking it. Then, Uaithne, hawthorn. "Do not be fooled by the white froth of its spring," Ogma says kindly. "Hawthorn is a boundary with manners." He notches the stroke a little sharper, and the grandmother nods as if hearing the old hedges speak. "Dare oak." The knife lays the line with the loyalty oak inspires. "For doors that will not betray you," Ogma says softly, "and for cups carved to last through grandchildren." "Tinna, holly, winter's green fist," he smiles. "Courage kept where leaves would drop. Call hazel, for wisdom that drops like a nut and makes teeth clever," he says. The littlest boy rubs his front teeth with a forefinger, considering. "Queert apple, for sweetness that remembers winter." He holds the slat up. 2 hands now, 10 marks, 10 small doors, 10 ways the mouth can go somewhere and come back with company. The littlest girl, who has been tracing the air with her finger, carving invisible strokes, asks, "If we write a name, will a person come?" Ogma does not laugh. He bends to her level. "If you write a name with love, your thought will sit beside them for a time. That is a kind of coming." "Can we write Mother?" the boy asks, suddenly shy in the way children become shy near the most important thing. "She is with the cows," the girl says. "And the cows are with the rain." "Yes," Ogma says. "We can write Mother." He shows them the strokes one by one, not spelling a language with rules yet, but laying sounds like stepping stones. "Your mouth knows the path," he says. "We are only mapping it." He lets them guide his hand the one notch, then another. On the slat, the idea of mother appears the way a tune appears when someone hums it twice. The boy exhales. The girl smiles with half her face, the secret half. They sit with it a while. Sometimes the best thing a letter can do is wait alongside the person who said it. From the field comes a warm racket, the Dagda laughing, children answering, the clank of spade against stone, refusing to be a problem for long. A voice. Perhaps the chestnut-haired girl calls, "It wants to be oats!" And the others cheer at the notion that a field can express a preference if you ask it properly. Ogma grins toward the sound without standing. "Consent of the land," he says. And the grandmother nods in that way grandmothers nod when youth remembers something old. He sets down the second slat and reaches for a third. "Now," he says, "the voices that lean left." His knife reverses direction. The stem stands. The notches slant the other way, like geese turning south. Strafe, blackthorn. For boundaries that know how to say no without apology. Ruiz elder. For endings that feed beginnings. For dye in the cloth. For songs hung to dry on hedges. Aelm, pine/fir. For the high air. For pitch that mends boats. For nights that smell like north. On, gorse. For yellow persistence. For fuel that burns hot when the rain thinks it has told you what to do. Or heather. For the purple rug of the hills. For bees that remember the recipe for honey in their sleep. He pauses. 3 slats now, each with its small choir of marks. The children breathe the way listeners breathe when the inside world and the outside world have agreed to match step for a time. "Will you keep them?" the grandmother asks, eyes on the slats like a weaver judging weft. "We will teach them," Ogma answers. "And then we will plant some. Carve them on standing stones where roads meet. Carve them on door lintels. Carve them on memory." "Careful," the grandmother says. "Words planted stand a long time. People will quote you while you are trying to eat your porridge in peace." "I will eat fast then," Ogma smiles. They laugh, and in laughing the air feels less like an idea and more like bread. To show the children how letters can hold a promise, Ogma takes a short scrap of yew and carves a simple oath, a borrowing of a spade to be returned clean by dusk. He speaks the words and lays the slat on the threshold. "See," he says, "the door now remembers with us. If we forget, the foot will find the slat and read us back into being the people we meant to be." The littlest pair nod solemnly, newly aware that a door can hold them to their best selves. The grandmother murmurs something that is more blessing than sentence. Outside, the field lifts a wind as if pleased. A skylark tries a line of song and decides to keep it. By midday, the hall smells of baked oatcakes and damp wool drying by the fire. The Dagda and the older children return, speckled with mud and bright with the success of deciding where the oats will take root. They bring with them a handful of field stones, polite enough to be set in a wall. The Dagda heaps them by the door like a story waiting its turn. "Bread?" the Dagda says, and the answer is yes. It is always yes when the bread is warm and the jam is made from fruit you remember picking. They eat. Between bites, Ogma sets the slats before the gathering. 5 and 5 and 5, he says, and more to come. But this is enough to start a bridge across the air. The chestnut-haired girl, who has been elected the bold one by the collective unconscious of the children, asks, "Can letters make a song?" The Dagda chuckles. "They can hold one's coat while it dances," he says. But the feet must still move. He reaches for Una and plucks a testing string. Ogma lays a slat beside the harp. "Let us try," he suggests. "We will sing the trees." He taps each notch and names it. The Dagda answers with a note. Birch's beginning, Rowan's ward, Alder's bridge, Willow's soft weeping, Ash's upright breath. The notes gather like bees choosing a home. Soon a chant forms, a low circle of sound that even the smallest can carry. Beath, Louise, Fern, Sail, Nyan. They go round again, and the hall becomes the inside of a bowl where sound is bred. When the chant quiets, Ogma sets one slat aside. "A letter is not a spear," he says softly. "We will not throw these at each other. A letter is a bridge and a bowl and a path. It makes more of us, not less," the Dagda adds. "And it is a door. You do not slam a good door. You open it and you close it kindly. So the house stays a house." The children nod, their eyes full of understanding they cannot yet name, but will carry into fields and winters and the way they speak to dogs who have made a mistake. From the doorway, a neighbor appears, hat in hand, winter wet, still clinging to the hem of his coat. "I heard you've got marks," he says, sheepish. "I've a boundary that needs saying, and my cousin hears only what agrees with him." Ogma gestures him in. "We have a mark that says no with respect," he answers. "It is the blackthorn. We will carve it on a stake and set it where the ditch runs, and we'll do it in daylight, in company, with bread and witnesses. Then the no will be clean." They do it. The hall empties into the hedgerow procession. Children with oatcakes, the Dagda with a spade and a mallet, Ogma with a yew stake in his arms like a holy thing. At the ditch, they set the stake. Ogma cuts the strafe notches crisp and true. The Dagda drives the post with 3 certain blows. The neighbour and his cousin, called from his sourness by the spectacle of children eating in public, shake hands on the stake. And the hedge, as if pleased to be addressed in its own language, rustles, like a grandmother putting away last arguments with a secret smile. Evening pads back on those quiet feet that brought morning. They return to the hall with the post-hunger of people who have done a right-sized task together. The Dagda pours stew into bowls. Ogma sets the slats on the mantel, where smoke will polish them. "Before sleep," Ogma says, "one more mark." He takes a little stone from the Dagda's pile, the kind that remembers river cold in summer and hand warmth in winter, and with a bit of char writes 5 tiny strokes along its edge. "This," he says, "is a pocket door. When you carry it, you carry the beginning of the bridge. If your courage forgets itself, touch the stone, and read yourself back to your feet. The chestnut-haired girl tucks the charred stone into her palm and feels taller by the width of a thought. The smallest boy gives his to the grandmother, who pretends her courage needs it very much, and then admits it will be happy to have company. The Dagda strokes Uaithne once, not the sorrow tune, not yet the sleep tune, but a middle path that says, "The day did enough, and you too. And now the night will take it from here." Ogma goes to the door where last night the Ogham began. "Birch," he whispers. "Rowan. Alder. Willow. Ash." He adds a breath for each and for the people who learned them today. "Let the letters be companions," he says. "Let them make more of us." The hall settles. The hound claims the warmest square of floor by ancient treaty. The hen, having earned tenure, takes the low bench. The Dagda covers the pot, and Uaithne leans against the bench the way a tired shoulder leans against another tired shoulder, and in doing so, becomes rest. Chapter 3. The Dagda's Great Cauldron. Magic, Abundance, and Irish Mythology. Dawn peels gently off the hills, like linen lifted from a sleeping child. The hall keeps its slow breathing, enders thinking themselves back toward flame. The river reciting its lesson to stones who have heard it all before and still ask for it again. In the middle of the room stands the cauldron, the Dagda's great black-bellied friend, its iron lips shining where years of ladles have kissed them. The Dagda is already there, sleeves rolled, hair arguing with its thong, cheeks ruddy from the weather's handshake. He taps the rim with a knuckle, listening the way a miller listens to grain, or a mother to a child who says, "I'm not tired," with a yawn as wide as a doorway. "Wake now," he tells the pot. "The world is hungry." He lays kindling just so, sets peat where it will smolder honest and long, and breathes once across the fire like a blessing sent from lip to ember. Ogma comes quietly with the light, cloak about his shoulders, the yew slats from yesterday tucked under his arm like thin loaves. He bows his head toward the cauldron, the way some bow toward east windows. "Good morning, old plenty," he says, and the pot answers with a tiny plop of remembered stew. There are as many tellings of the cauldron's first coming as there are hearths to tell them by. Some say it was one of the 4 treasures carried over sea from the city of Murius, gifted by wise hands who knew the cure for hunger is not merely food, but welcome. Others say it grew from the island itself, well turned inside out to be a bowl, so that what once hid in the dark would henceforth feed in the light. And there is a quieter version, the Dagda's own, which says the pot listens to what is given and returns it in the shape most needed. However it came, it stands here, and it keeps its promise. Not by tricking the belly or making thin porridge seem thick, but by multiplying honest gifts until no one remembers what it felt like to guard a spoon with their eyes. The Dagda sets about the work whose true name is hospitality. He goes to the doorway and shakes the morning like a blanket so the day will lie flat. He speaks a list that is also a prayer. Barley, oats, venison, carrots, onions, a shoulder of pork salted last new moon, a clean fist of herbs, thyme, marjoram, a little nettle for iron, and an apple cut small for sweetness that does not brag. The bench answers with what the bench knows where to find. From a shelf, salt. From the hook, bay leaves like green ears. From a child's careful hands, the bread left covered to keep it from learning dust. As the pot begins to bubble, Ogma sits beside it and lays the slats on his knees. Today, he says, we'll show the letters how to share. If a mark can carry a loaf from one mouth to another without dropping crumbs, then it is a good mark. The Dagda grins. Then write the recipe, he suggests, so even the wind will know what makes a man feel looked after. Ogma hums and begins. Beath for beginning, he scratches on a slate with char. Dire for oak smoke, giving its patient strength to the broth. Col for hazel wisdom, a handful of crushed nuts to thicken the telling. Quirt for apple dice, small sunlit squares. Sail for the softness that holds sorrow and makes it edible. Good, the Dagda says after every stroke, tasting with a wooden spoon and nodding as if to a counsel that agrees with him. Neighbours drift to the door, the way bees drift to lavender. First one, then three. Then the murmur becomes a wee. A thatcher with bits of straw in his hair. A mother with a baby who is not hungry, but enjoys auditioning for the part. Two old men who pretend they came to argue, and actually came to share the listening. The Dagda makes room without making fuss. He sets bowls on the long board, checks the oak lid for a moment's sleep on the pot, turns bread, lifts the lid again. The steam comes out like a benediction, and 40 faces inhale as one. Not yet, he laughs. The broth is telling me its last secret. He dips, he tastes, and he adds only water, just a little, because a gift grows larger when watered with trust. At the door, 2 men appear, with the look of counters, tab keepers, levy takers, eyes weighing your hunger like a barley sack. They clear their throats in the official way of people who have forgotten how to arrive as guests. The hall grows attentive, but not afraid. The Dagda sets down his spoon and wipes his hands, the way a man does before he picks up either a club or a child. Here, he will pick up neither, only welcome. You're in time, he says simply. Sit. We'll talk after eating. One of the men opens his mouth to say assessment. What comes out instead is steam smell, and the memory of a winter night when his mother kept a bowl for him under a towel. He sits, without meaning to. The other follows, because even authority has a stomach. After the first hunger is quieted, the hall opens its ears for stories. because fed bellies make the best listeners. The Dagda wipes the rim of the pot with the back of a spoon, a gesture like turning down a bed, then leans on the bench with that enormous gentleness that fits a giant who knows his own strength. There was a winter, he begins. Not the worst, not the kind that steals sheep from under your gaze, but a pinching one that made cheerful people thrifty and thrifty people sharp. He looks toward the counters without accusation. In that winter, the pot learned to listen. He tells how a spinster came with only a thimble of salt and a story about her sister, who used to sing as if her bones had skylarks in them. How much salt? The Dagda had asked. As much as a joke can bear before it becomes a boast, she'd said. They had laughed, and the thimble had become a whole handful in the pot. No one knows how. Not too much, not too little, but exactly what the day could abide. He tells how a widower brought an onion wrapped in a sock, because that was the only cloth left in the house that had memories worth wringing into the broth. The sock went in, washed first, and the onion with it, and the soup that day tasted like rain remembered by grass. And a boy once, the Dagda adds, a small lad with mud on his knees, and 3 blackberries saved in his fist from a hedge he shouldn't have been at. We put them in just for him. The whole pot blushed summer. Around the hall heads nod. Some eyes wept for reasons more complex than onions alone. Ogma listens as if each story were a notch on an unseen stave. He understands that the cauldron is not only a thing, it is a practice. Write it, the Dagda says, and Ogma scratches another counsel in char. Give your small. The pot will make it large. Give your best. The pot will make it common. At the door, a thin man lingers. The kind of thin that comes from measuring himself against official tables and always being found within a hair of wrong. He is a Fomorian tax-taker's clerk, sent to watch how the Tuatha carry their food. The hall feels him like a draught, and then decides not to be cold. Come, the Dagda says. Your bones will stand straighter if the soup holds them. The man nearly refuses, then remembers that refusal is a poor diet. He steps inside and becomes, for one bowl's length, only a man. He eats as if he has been taught to make no sound. But the spoon touches the bowl, and the bowl answers, and that is music enough. When the bowl is empty, he looks startled to find relief sitting in his shoulders, like a cat that has chosen him. Tell your master, Ogma says, that the law of plenty is older than crowns and wiser than ledgers. Tell him, the Dagda adds, eyes kind but unblinking, that tribute taken from a hungry table turns to stone before it reaches his mouth. The clerk swallows, recognizes truth by the way it warms him, and makes him uneasy at the same time, and says only, I will tell what I can tell. And here, the harp enters, because some truths ask for strings. The Dagda sets Una on his knee and plays the joy tune. Not loud, not fast, but forward-moving as bread rising. Laughter catches in the rafters like birds who know the way home. After music, the portioning begins, the sacred choreography of enough. A new pot is added, so the first pot can rest. A child is given the spoon, under watch, to ladle for elders. The last ladle is poured back into the first pot, so tomorrow will remember today. Why return the last? Asks the chestnut-haired girl, chin shining with stew. So the pot won't be lonely. The Dagda winks, then grows serious. So that memory seasons tomorrow. Ogma marks the notion on the slate. Save a spoonful for the morning. It will save you back. From the far side of the room, the grandmother, who has seen winters become stories, speaks softly. A full table is a kind of spell that teaches hands not to clench. Keep it, and you keep the weather from turning mean. Everyone nods, the way people nod when someone else has spoken their thought aloud. The cauldron breathes a quiet bubble. Agreement, perhaps, or digestion. And the day leans its shoulder into afternoon. By dusk, the sky loses its blue, the way a loaf loses steam. Slowly, fragrantly, without complaint. The meadow lays down its gold. The hedges tuck in their sparrows. The river keeps its soft arithmetic. Inside, the hall becomes what halls wish to be at day's end. A womb for tired feet, and a library for new sown stories. The cauldron, scrubbed with ash and praise, stands clean and black, cooling like a stone well that has given up its secrets and is content to be dark again. The Dagda sits with Uaithne, and Ogma sets the slate where all can see. On it, a ladder of small wisdoms from the day. Give your small, the pot will make it large. Save a spoonful, it will save you back. Enough is not an accident. Before sleep, Ogma says, one last telling. How a pot can keep a people. He speaks of roads kept safer by feasting than by spears. Because a satisfied traveller is a herald of good news. He tells of quarrels postponed until after supper, and how after supper, the quarrel had already forgotten the shape of its teeth. He tells of loves that began because two strangers reached for the same ladle and found their hands warmer together than apart. And he doesn't say, the Dagda adds with a grin, that more than once a hungry enemy has eaten his way into being a neighbor. From the doorway comes the brief silhouette of the clerk returning, not to count, but to stand a moment in the smell of bread. He leaves nothing but a nod, and takes nothing but a changed idea of what a strong house looks like. The Dagda rises and walks to the cauldron, lays his palm on its rim. Rest, he tells it. You've kept your side of the bargain. He lays the oak lid on top like a blanket. He turns to Una and, because there are 3 tunes and each knows its time, he plays the sorrow tune first. Not to summon tears, but to rinse whatever the day left sticky behind the eyes. It moves through the room like rain through heather, and leaves everything clean and a little shining. Then the joy tune, small and skipping as a child who forgot to be tired, and laughter lands in laps like kittens who have decided to belong. Finally, the sleep tune, the one that knows the latitude of each eyelid and the longitude of every worry, and charts a simple route away from both. The hound resettles with a grunt that means safe. The hen makes the agreeable sound hens make when they remember a dream of warm straw. Ogma stands at the door and touches the Ogham. The 5 first marks and their friends learn today, breathing each with the gratitude of a worker washing his hands. He adds one more tiny stroke in char on the inside of the lintel, where only the house and the night can read it. Let no mouth go ashamed from here. The room feels the sentence like a blanket. Even the beams relax an inch. Tomorrow, the Dagda murmurs, we'll teach the pot a new recipe. Crowberry, if they can be persuaded to let go of their bushes, and time, if it doesn't mind being loved too much. Tomorrow, Ogma answers. I'll show the children how to leave a mark kindly, how to write no without turning the door into a wall. The harp's last string holds, like a star that hasn't learned the trick of going out. Outside, the river signs its name once more across the dark. Inside, the cauldron keeps its quiet. And in that quiet, the promise of enough hums like bees in their sleep. Chapter 4. The Tyranny of Bres. Tribute and hunger in Celtic legend. The year turned, as years will, and the fields leaned golden, ready to be cut. But where harvest should have brought song, it brought levy. And where cattle should have lowed with fat bellies, they lowed in confusion, herded past their owners' doors toward strangers' hands. This was the reign of Bres, son of a Fomorian father and a Tuatha mother, set on the throne when the old king Nuada lost his hand in battle. At first, some thought the choice wise, a bridge between kin, a compromise that might soften the quarrels of gods and giants. But compromise can sour when one side calls it peace and the other calls it profit. Bres ruled with a hunger not his own, but borrowed from the Fomorians who whispered at his ear. He measured milk with the hand of a stranger, counted grain as if it were coin, and set levies so harsh that laughter fell silent, even at weddings. Where once the Dagda's cauldron had brimmed with welcome, now bowls were snatched before the ladle reached them. Where Ogma's words had chained men to joy, now chains of iron crept in to bind cattle and kin. It was said that Bres himself ate daintily, with silver knives, while his people licked empty fingers and learned the ache of shame hunger, the hunger that comes not only from empty bellies, but from seeing food withheld that could so easily be shared. The Dagda bore it long, not from cowardice, but from patience. the patience of a farmer who knows some frosts must be endured. He kept his cauldron working, though the Fomorian collectors came often to claim the fat from its stews. And he made sure there was always something hidden at the bottom for the old, the sick, the ones who could not fight their own hunger. Ogma bore it too, but in another way. He spoke at gatherings, weaving his chains of speech to keep anger from shattering into despair. But words, however golden, cannot fill a child's stomach. And so Ogma began to carve more, cutting Ogham on doorposts and stones, leaving quiet messages where eyes could find them. Enough is a right. Remember the pot. A no spoken together is stronger than a yes spoken alone. These marks spread like seeds on the wind. A man might touch one carved in the lintel of a cattle byre and feel his back straighten. A woman might brush one on the handle of a churn and remember that milk given freely tastes sweeter. And children, tracing the strokes with curious fingers, grew up with the knowledge that letters could carry resistance as well as love. One evening, as the sky lowered its red brow and the cattle plodded home with ribs showing, a gathering was called in the hall of quiet harps. The Dagda stood with the club across his knees, not threatening, but present, a reminder that kindness does not mean weakness. Ogma set the slats before the children, though tonight they would learn no new letters. Tonight, the letters already cut would be enough. Neighbours crowded in, herdsmen and weavers, women with infants, old warriors leaning on sticks. And in their faces was the ache of those who had bent their necks too long. The Dagda lifted his voice, not with harp nor with spell, but with the plain speech of a man who has seen winter and spring and knows what each one costs. They take tribute as if it were law, he said, but the true law is older. The earth gives, the river gives, the fire gives, and we give back, not by hoarding, but by tending. A pot that feeds only the hand that stirs it is a pot that dies. Ogma followed, his chains of speech uncoiling across the rafters. Bres says we are small, and so he counts us. But the truth is, we are many, and so we may count ourselves. He says hunger is our portion, but hunger is not a destiny. It is a weapon, and weapons may be broken. We will remember who we are, the people of Danu, of river and root, of word and work. The hall breathed as one, not rebellion yet, but the first stirring. The moment when people look at each other and realize their neighbor is hungry too, and that shame lies not in hunger, but in hoarding. That night, after the gathering, the Dagda sat long by the cauldron, stirring nothing, only listening to the iron sing in the heat. Ogma carved a final message into the door lintel, strokes deep enough to last through storm and season, plenty shared is power kept. And outside, beyond the hedge, the watchers of Bres carried their tallies back to him, their tablets heavy with counts of cattle and grain. But in their hearts, though they did not admit it even to themselves, there lingered the taste of stew, the warmth of a hall where even enemies were fed before questioned. And some part of them wondered, in the secret corner of the soul where kings cannot tax, whether Bres's hunger could last against such abundance of spirit. Chapter 5. The Morrígan and the Dagda. Samhain prophecies at the river ford. The wheel of the year turned toward Samhain, the thin night when summer folds its cloak and winter shows its first teeth. It was the hinge of the seasons, the night when cattle were driven down from high pasture, when fires were banked and relit, when the veil between the living and the dead drew itself to a whisper. The Tuatha Dé Danann gathered, their breath white in the cold, their hearts heavy with the tribute of Bres and the growing shadow of the Fomorians. And in that hour of uncertainty, the Dagda was told he must go to the Morrígan, the phantom queen, goddess of battle, crow on the shoulder of fate. The Dagda listened and nodded, though his great hands stirred uneasily on the bench. For the Morrígan was no easy company. She was river and raven, blood and prophecy, a woman who could love with the ferocity of fire and curse with the patience of stone. Still, he went, because even the strongest pot cannot feed a war without knowing the shape of it first, and only the Morrígan knew the shapes that waited in the dark year ahead. The ford where she waited lay deep in the river Unius, black water running slow beneath twisted trees, the air heavy with the musk of rot and leaf. The night of Samhain wrapped the banks in mist. The reeds hissed with secrets, and the crows gathered in the branches like unstruck notes on a harp. The Dagda came with his club slung across his back, and his belly full from the last good meal he would eat before battle. His cloak was patched, his boots muddied, but his step was steady. He was not ashamed of his bulk or his homeliness. He carried them as openly as his strength. And there, standing in the shallows with water curling about her thighs, was the Morrígan. Her hair spilled like a storm cloud. Her eyes were the colour of crow wings in starlight, and her body gleamed, pale and cold as the river itself. She was woman. She was battlefield. She was omen. She spoke first, her voice low, like stones grinding beneath black water. "Good God," she said. "You come to me at Samhain. Do you come to take or to ask?" The Dagda did not lower his gaze. "I come to do both," he answered. "I come to ask your counsel, and I come to give myself, if that is your asking." The Morrígan tilted her head, the way a crow does when it wonders if what it sees is alive or already carrion. "And if I asked the weight of your body in mine, in the cold water of this ford, Would you give that too? The Dagda smiled, wide and unashamed. The kind of smile that makes even shadows feel the warmth of fire. Aye, he said. For I am not a man who fears joining flesh with fate. If your will is to bind us, I will not come half-hearted. And so, under the crooked branches and the eye of crows, the Dagda joined with the Morrígan in the cold black river. The water held them, the mist veiled them, and the night itself seemed to pause in its breathing. She was fierce, like the pull of battle. He was vast, like the promise of earth. Their union was not tender, but true, the kind that shakes the air and leaves the reeds bowing. When it was done, they stood together in the ford, the water slick on their skin, the breath of winter licking at their backs. The Morrigan's eyes glowed, not with love, but with prophecy. Now you may ask, she said. The Dagda, still breathing heavily, set his hands upon his thighs and bowed his head. Not in shame, but in respect. Tell me, he said, what awaits us at Mag Tuired? Tell me the fate of the Tuatha Dé Danann. She lifted her arms, and the water coiled around them like serpents. Her voice rose, crow-sharp and river-deep. I see blood on the grass, and the cries of dying men. I see the Fomorian host, vast as storm clouds, their ships black on the sea, their spears like reeds in a poisoned marsh. I see kings falling and champions broken. I see chains and tribute, and the smoke of hearths gone dark. The Dagda's shoulders bowed, as if the weight of her vision pressed on his bones. But the Morrigan's voice shifted, soft and sharp as a crow's wing in sudden flight. I see also a breaking of chains. I see a writher of spears turned against the giants. I see your people rise. Though bloodied, though weary, and I see Bres cast down, his crown in the mud, his hunger silenced. The Tuatha Dé Danann will endure, but only if you fight as one, word and work, prophecy and spear, cauldron and club. The Dagda lifted his head, the river sliding from his beard. You have given me truth, he said softly, and I will carry it, heavy though it is. He turned then, but the Morrigan caught his arm. Wait, she said. Our bond is not of flesh alone. At the battle to come, I will be there, as crow, as shadow, as terror in the hearts of your enemies. Do not doubt me, good God. When the field runs red, look for me at your side. The Dagda nodded once, slowly. I will, he said, and then he left her in the ford, the river whispering around her legs, the crows rising with a rattle of wings like black banners shaken in the wind. Behind him, her voice carried, thin and sharp as frost. Victory will be ours, but at a price every hearth will feel. That night, as he returned to the hall, the Dagda felt both burden and strength. Ogma listened, his eyes dark with thought, as the Dagda told of their union, their pact, their prophecy. And together they sat in silence, the harp between them, the cauldron at their side, and the letters carved deep into the wood. Word and work, waiting for war. Chapter 6. The Three Tunes of Uaithne, the Dagda's Magic Harp. The night after Samhain's ford lay heavy and listening. The hall kept a small fire, as if not to rouse what rested beyond the door. On the bench between the brothers leaned Uaithne, the Dagda's harp, its wood polished by years of forearms and seasons of songs. The strings were quiet, but not asleep. Quiet in the way a lake is quiet, while keeping 1,000 small weathers beneath. The Dagda sat with his hands open on his knees, broad palms turned to the fire, as if warming the tools of a craft. Ogma watched the door, where the Ogham marks rested like sentries. Beath, Luis, Fern, Sail, Nian, and beyond them the dark, where the Morrigan's crows were folding their wings. "You should play," Ogma said at last, his voice low enough not to wake the sleeping cat. "The heart needs a road through the night." The Dagda nodded once and drew Uaithne onto his thigh. He did not test a string as a showy man might. He laid his left hand along the neck as a farmer lays a hand along a horse's face before dawn. "There are 3 tunes," he murmured, letting the words shape the room. Gentrade, the tune of joy. Goldtrade, the tune of sorrow. Suontrade, the tune of sleep. He stroked one string, and the air changed temperature by a single breath. "Tonight we will learn where each belongs, so that when the field shakes, no one who stands with us will forget how to stand." He began with Goldtrade, the sorrow tune, though most men would have chosen joy to shore up courage. But the Dagda knew that unspilled grief makes the hands shake at the wrong hour. The first notes found the low beams and travelled them as if counting years. They moved past the hearth, through the rafters, under the door, and a little way down the path, where they touched the hedges and made the leaves remember their greenness in summer. Inside, eyelids softened. The hound's breath went long and even. The cat stopped pretending not to listen. For the sorrow tune is not a wound, it is water. It does not break, it loosens. It finds where the day stuck, and it rinses, like rain persuading mud to let go of a boot. Faces around the room changed without moving. Here, a man's mouth eased where a hard word had lodged. There, a woman's hand unclenched from the small shape of an old fear. And in the corner, A child who had been brave for days allowed a single tear to fall, and discovered it did not drown him. Ogma watched, his own breath taking the harp's measure, and he traced in char upon a slate a single thought. Let grief finish its sentence. The Dagda played on, and the sorrow did its good work. No wailing, no tearing, only that deep rinsing. Every house owes itself from time to time. When he let the string fall quiet, the silence did not rush back. It came like a friend who knows the latch and will not bang it. "Now," said the Dagda softly, "there is room for joy." He turned his hand and called Gentrade, the joy tune. It did not leap. It rose, like bread remembering yeast, like a field remembering sun, like children remembering a joke they promised not to tell, and telling it anyway with their eyes. The notes linked elbows and walked the hall. They tapped each shoulder. You. Yes, you. And wherever they touched, the mouth curved and the back found a taller line. Old men lifted their chins, as if a breeze had just gotten under their hats. Women laughed, the little laugh that means we are not beaten. Ógma felt the joy tune stitch bright thread through the sorrow's clean cloth. He wrote on the slate, "Let joy arrive after water. It will find purchase." The Dagda played a figure that sounded like kettles gossiping and boots finding the right peg. Then he braided in a line like skylarks writing a letter to whoever remembered to look up. It was not foolish joy. It had weight, the kind of weight that keeps a tent from collapsing in wind. He let the last bright pluck hang for a heartbeat and fade into the beams. "Now," he said, "Suan trade." The sleep tune is not notes alone. It is permission. The Dagda set his left hand across the lower strings like a lid settling on a pot, and with his right hand stroked a slow road across the upper ones. The room obeyed as if it had been waiting all day for someone to tell it the work was over. Backs loosened, jaws unlatched, eyes forgot their watch. The hound exhaled a long, old man sigh, and then one short puppy sigh for luck. The cat transformed into a black heap that contained one gold eye and then, presently, no gold eye at all. Ogma did not try to stay awake to prove something. He let the tune hold him for a breath and then another. And for a little while he dreamed a hall with no doors, because nothing wished to come or go except sleep. The Dagda kept playing until even the fire stopped arguing with its own sticks. When he lowered his hands, the night settled around the strings like feathers. He leaned Una against the bench, patted the oak lid of the cauldron, and sat with the contentment of a man whose tools remember him. "Tomorrow," he whispered to the wood and the iron, "you'll need to sing on a stranger's floor." Then he closed his eyes and let the last unplayed note carry him into its quiet. Morning came with a thin frost that made the grass speak underfoot. News travelled like sparrows, quick, nervous, landing in clusters. A Fomorian troop had come up the road at first light, swaggering toward a feasting hall not far from the river. Bres's men, long on appetite and short on courtesy. The Dagda and Ogma went together. No war party, no fanfare. A giant with a harp and a champion with a stick. The closer they came, the louder the Fomorian laughter. Bowls knocked, benches dragged. A Lord Steward shouting for a harpist to play something with proper fear in it. The brothers crossed the threshold like weather. Inside, the harp of that hall hung high on pegs, strings cut, a trophy in its own home. A war drum thudded, thick and dull as a blocked ear. The Dagda set Uaithne on his knee without asking leave. A Fomorian captain, broad, tusked, drunk on his own noise, snorted. "You," he said, "play something to make our enemies cry." The Dagda's smile was kind and unremarkable, like a loaf on a table where everyone expects bread. "As you wish," he said. He called Galtrade, but not for the Tuatha, for them. The sorrow tune left his hand and did what water does when it finds stone pretending to be a heart. It went in at the cracks. It remembered the names of mothers. It found the places under armor where boys had been told to be men too fast, and it said, "Hush, hush, I know." The war drum faltered. A soldier whose mouth was made for shouting put a hand to his face and did not know why it was wet. Some put down their bowls. One put down his sword, only for a moment. But the sword remembered the floor and did not wish to be picked up again. When the Dagda lifted his hand, the room did not dare fill the silence with swagger. Instead, they looked at him the way cattle look at a man who has never struck them, hopeful and confused. "Another," the captain said, hoarse, trying to recover. "Something that makes us laugh at them." "As you wish," said the Dagda again. And he called Gentrade, the joy tune, but the joy he gave them was honest, the kind that remembers water and bread and children dropping berries into a pot. Men who were used to laughing like axes laughed for the first time in months, like men. A few looked at each other with the fresh embarrassment of those who realize they have been cruel beyond necessity. Then, with the room's breath held like a sling stone in a steady hand, the Dagda said quietly, "And now, Suantrade." The sleep tune he played was the kindness that conquers without boasting. It went over the benches and into the shoulders of men taught to keep watch, even in their dreams. And it said, "Put it down now. There is a door where you can set it, and no one will steal it while you sleep." Heads lowered, bowls slid, swords learned again how to be metal. In the doorway, Ogma watched and measured the beats until he knew the moment when even the captain's eyelids forgot to argue. "Now," Ogma whispered, and the two moved like a tide turning. They did not kill. They reclaimed. The hall's harp was lifted from its hooks with a careful hand. The steward's ledger, filled with levies unjust, was closed and set under the elbow of a sleeping man who would wake with ink on his sleeve and questions in his mouth. At the threshold, the Dagda paused. He set Uaithne upright and plucked one bright string that sounded exactly like a clean morning. "Remember this," he said to the sleeping. "You do not have to be worse than you are." They left the hall with its own harp restored, and the men within it returned to the only honest battle they could fight that hour, the one where the body must surrender to rest. Word of what the harp had done ran along hedgerows, and soon the Fomorians learned that war would not only be of sword against sword, but of tune against terror. Some scoffed. Others, who knew their own mothers' names, did not. In the Hall of Quiet Harps, the children asked to hear the 3 tunes again. The Dagda obliged. Sorrow to rinse, joy to stitch, sleep to seal. He taught them a small refrain to carry in their pockets like bread. Water first, then light, then rest. Ogma carved those words in short Ogham on small river stones and pressed them into small hands. "Use them," he said, "when your heart forgets which door to try." That night, the Morrigan's crows flew low over the roof, and the fire answered with a taller flame, as if to say, "We are awake." The Dagda laid Uaithne beside the cauldron, wood to iron, music to food, and the brothers slept a sleep that did not need help from any tune. Chapter 7. The Gathering at Mag Tuired. The Tuatha prepare for battle. The Morrigan's prophecy clung to the rafters like smoke that will not rise. The brothers sat long by the fire, Ogma with his slate of letters, the Dagda with his cauldron spoon idle in his hand. They knew now what the ford had spoken. Battle would come. The Fomorian levy had grown too sharp, too greedy. The land groaned under tribute, and hunger had become the only language in too many mouths. It was time to gather. Not only warriors, but words. Not only weapons, but oaths. The war cannot be fought with sword alone. It must also be fought with memory, with promise, with song. Messengers went out across the hills, boys with quick feet, women who carried bread in their cloaks, old men who remembered the safest paths through the bog. Each carried not only a word, but a mark, cut into wood or stone by Ogma's hand. Mag Tuired. That was the place. The plain where the people of Danu would stand against the giants, where blood would darken the grass, and prophecy would either bloom or wither. The Tuatha came in trickles at first, a shepherd with a crooked spear, a smith with soot still on her cheek, a harpist who carried no sword, but carried songs sharper than bronze. Children came too, not to fight, but to carry water, to keep fires, to hold the old ones' hands when fear prowled too near. Ogma greeted each with words that bound like chain, but shone like gold. Here you are counted. Here you are kin. Here you are more than your hunger. The Dagda fed them with a cauldron, ladling broth into bowls, as if every bowl had a crown on it. He did not ask for names first. He asked only, "Have you eaten?" And when the answer was yes, then he asked, "Will you stand?" Meanwhile, Bres heard. From his high seat, he counted tribute tallies, weighed cattle against warriors, and smiled with a thin mouth. "Let them gather," he told his Fomorian captains. "The more in one place, the more for the taking." But in the shadows of his smile, unease flickered. For even kings who count hunger like coin cannot stop the echo of prophecy in their bones. At Mag Tuired, the plain filled like a bowl. Tents stitched of wool and rush sprang up. Fires licked meat and oatcakes. The smell of peat drifted with laughter and weeping alike. It was not only an army, it was a people. The smith's hammer rang, the harpist tuned. The children learned Ogham on smooth pebbles and passed them hand to hand. Ogma walked among them, binding courage with words. He carved Ogham on stakes planted at the edge of the camp. Plenty shared is power kept. A no spoken together is stronger than a yes spoken alone. Remember the pot. The Dagda moved like weather between fires. Where meat was thin, he added broth. Where broth was thin, he added barley. Where barley was gone, he added only water and a story. And still the pot brimmed. It was said that when the ladle dipped, the broth always carried enough, and no child went to sleep with ribs counting themselves. And on the third night, the Morrígan came. Not as a woman in the ford, not as a lover in the river's cold arms, but as a crow, black and fierce, landing on the roof beam above the brothers. Her cry tore the night. Every heg lifted, every fire dimmed. She spoke in human voice, low and terrible. Blood will drench this grass. Kings will fall. Champions will lie broken. But if you hold fast, if you fight as one, victory will be yours. The crows took wing, black confetti in the starlight, and silence fell so deep that even the river forgot to murmur. That night, sleep was heavy. Not the sleep of Una's gentle tune, but the sleep of bodies hoarding their strength for what was to come. The Dagda sat long by the cauldron, hand on its iron lip, whispering thanks for every bowl it had filled. Ógma traced the Ogham marks by the fire's red glow, teaching the children a final phrase before bed. We are many. And when the camp's last ember dimmed, the plain of Mag Tuired breathed with the sound of a people readying for dawn. Morning came, raw and grey. The mist clung low on the grass. The dew was heavy enough to drown ants. Across the plain, shields gleamed dull as wet stones. Spears bristled like reeds in a marsh. The Dagda hefted his club, the one end heavy enough to kill, the other gentle enough to heal. He looked at Ogma, whose hands held no weapon but words, yet whose shoulders were set like a warrior's. Brother, said the Dagda, today the pot will not be enough. Then we will add words to it, said Ogma. And they clasped forearms, iron and oak, Cauldron and Ogham, ready to meet what the Morrígan had promised. The Fomorian host came in sight before noon, black sails on the horizon, black helms under them, giants striding with spears the size of tree trunks. Their laughter rolled like thunder. Their drums shook the ribs of the plain. Bres rode at their head, his crown sharp with gold, his eyes sharper with greed. He raised his hand, and the tribute takers lifted chains. This plain, he cried, is mine. These cattle are mine. These fields are mine. You are mine. The Tuatha did not answer with chains. They answered with a roar that was not rage but refusal. It was the sound of hunger that will not bow, of grief that has been rinsed, of joy that has been stitched, of sleep that has been taken and is ready now to be spent. Ogma raised his hand and shouted, "Plenty shared is power kept." And the camp answered, voice upon voice, word upon word, until the air itself carried the chain of speech. The Dagda lifted his club, and the cauldron behind him seemed to smoke with a deeper fire. He bellowed once, not a word, but a sound like the earth remembering it has teeth. And so the two hosts surged toward each other. The plain of Mag Tuired, waiting to drink the blood the Morrígan had promised. Chapter 8. The Battle of Mag Tuired. Blood, prophecy, and victory. The morning mist lifted from the plain like a veil, and beneath it, the two hosts glared across the grass. On one side, the Tuatha Dé Danann, their shields bright, though many were patched, their spears lifted, though many hands trembled. On the other, the Fomorians, black-armoured, tusked, tall as trees, their laughter rolling like storm surf against cliffs. Above them all, the Morrígan wheeled as a crow, her cry sharp as iron splitting bone. Her shadow swept across both armies, and where it fell, the hair on men's necks stood upright. The Dagda stood in the front rank, club on his shoulder. the cauldron at his back, smoke rising from it like a banner of plenty. Ogma stood beside him, no weapon in his hand but his words. And yet, every man in hearing felt as if a chain bound their fear and fastened it to courage. "Brothers," Ogma cried, voice like hammered bronze. "Today you fight for more than your hunger. You fight for the right to share, for the hearth that feeds all, for the words that bind us as kin. Do not bow. Do not break. We are many," the Tuatha roared back, a sound that cracked the mist apart. It was not the roar of hatred. It was the roar of those who had remembered themselves. The Fomorians surged first. Their spears fell like black rain. Shields splintered. Men fell. But the Tuatha answered. Arrows sang, swords flashed, and the plain shuddered beneath the weight of feet rushing to meet fate. The Dagda swung his club. One end struck a giant and split him like oak in frost. The other end touched a fallen man, and the warrior rose again, gasping, blinking, grip returning to his spear. Death and life in one weapon, wielded by one hand. Ogma's voice carried across the din. "Hold the line! The earth is with you. The rivers are with you. The letters are with you." And men who might have dropped their shields lifted them higher. For words weigh as much as bronze when spoken true. Above, the Morrígan shrieked. She swooped upon a Fomorian captain, talons raking his eyes, beak tearing his throat. Blood fell on the grass, and the grass drank deep as prophecy had promised. Her cry rang again. Victory, but at cost. The battle spread wide, each corner of the plain alive with clash and cry. At the northern edge, Luke of the Long Arm cast spear and sling like lightning, cutting paths through the giants. At the southern flank, Nuada of the Silver Hand fought as if his missing flesh had only made his spirit sharper. But at the heart of the field, it was still the Dagda's club and Ogma's chains of speech that bound the Tuatha from breaking. Midday burned mist away. The sun stood high, pale and pitiless, watching men fall like sheaves under a reaper's hand. The grass was no longer green. It was painted in streaks of red and black, and the smell of iron and smoke thickened the air. The Dagda fought until sweat ran in rivers down his beard. Each swing of the club broke bone, but each gentle touch brought a brother back from the brink. The cauldron boiled behind him, never empty, ladled by children who darted through the chaos, carrying broth to mouths too weary to lift spoons. And those who drank found strength like spring water flooding dry roots. Ogma shouted until his voice was bloodied, words chaining courage to men's hearts. When a line buckled, he lifted his arm, and his words pulled it straight as an iron bar across a broken cart. when a man faltered, Ogma's voice caught him before the ground did. And yet, the Fomorians pressed hard. They were many, and their giants towered, and Bres urged them on with promises of tribute beyond counting. One after another, Tuatha champions fell, some to rise again by the Dagda's touch, some to rise no more. Then came Balor of the Evil Eye, the Fomorian king, grandfather of Lu, a giant with one eye shut and the other deadly. When his lid was lifted, the gaze of that eye burned like sun focused through glass, and wherever it looked, men withered and died. The Tuatha staggered, the plain darkened. Even Ogma's words faltered against that terrible sight. But the Morrígan cried from above, "Stand, sons and daughters of Danu! Stand, for prophecy walks here." And through the lines strode Lu, bright and fierce, the long-armed champion. He faced Balor, his sling in his hand, his spear ready. The Dagda and Ogma watched, breath caught, as Lu called on all skill, all craft, all fate. Balor's eye opened wide, fire searing the grass. But Lu's spear flew true. It struck the evil eye, driving it back through the giant's skull, shattering him from within. Balor fell like a toppled tower, shaking the plain with his death. The ground trembled as Balor struck earth. The Fomorian host staggered. Their laughter died. Some dropped spears, some broke and ran, some fought on, but their strength bled out with their king. The Tuatha pressed forward. Nuada's silver hand shone. The Morrígan descended in fury, tearing, shrieking, scattering terror like seed. And the Dagda's club swung wide, his cauldron steaming with victory's hunger. Ogma's voice rose one last time, binding them all together. Remember the pot. Remember the words. Remember we are many. And the chain of speech grew so strong that the Fomorians could not break it, no matter how sharp their iron. By dusk, the plain was theirs. Bodies lay heavy, friend and foe alike. The air was thick with the silence after shouting, the hush after thunder. The Dagda lowered his club and leaned on it as a farmer leans on a spade at day's end. Ogma sat on a stone, slate in his lap, carving with shaking hand one last Ogham line. Victory is shared, like bread. The Morrígan stood on the hilltop, hair wild, eyes aflame, and she cried her prophecy fulfilled. The Fomorians are broken. Tribute is ended. The Tuatha endure. Her cry rolled across the plain, and the crows answered in black chorus. The grass drank blood, the sky closed its eye, and night came soft, but certain. That night, around the cauldron, the Tuatha ate, not with boasting, not with greed, but with the solemn gratitude of those who had nearly been nothing. The Dagda ladled broth with slow hands, feeding those who had fought, those who had carried water. those who had sung, those who had wept. Ogma's words wrapped around them like cloaks. We have paid the price, but we endure. The plain will grow green again. The pot will fill again. The letters will hold us together. And when the last bowls were emptied, and the harp sang its sleep tune over the weary plain, the Tuatha slept, the sleep of a people who had stood, fought, bled, and yet endured. Chapter 9. The Aftermath and Judgment of Bres. Mercy, Justice, and Renewal. The plain of Mag Tuired lay quiet. Smoke rose in threads where fires had burned. The grass was crushed, dark with blood, and the ravens fed their fill. But among the Tuatha Dé Danann, there was life. Battered, broken, grieving, but life. And where there is life, there can be healing. The Dagda moved through the camp like weather, touching the fallen with his club's gentle end. Some rose with groans and blinking eyes. Others stirred no more. He carried both with equal care. The living back to tents, the dead to cairns where songs waited. Ogma walked with him, words a balm where touch could not reach. He bent to whisper to the grieving, "Your sorrow is not small." He carved Ogham on flat stones for children to hold, marks of memory, so no name would vanish with the smoke. At last, when the wounded were tended, when the dead were named, a different task waited. The captains of the Tuatha brought forward their prisoner, Bres, son of Fomor, fallen king. Once proud, once cruel. He now knelt in the dirt, crown lost, eyes hollow. The people gathered, voices low with anger that had waited too long. "Kill him," some said. "Let him pay in blood for hunger he gave us." But others whispered, "He is half of us still, born of Tuatha mother, Fomorian father. What lesson will his death give? What lesson will his life?" The Dagda lifted his great hand. Silence fell. He looked on Bres with eyes not cruel, but steady as stone. "Your reign starved us," he said, "and tribute ate our children's strength. For that you deserve no throne, no crown, no seat among kings." But the Morrigan's prophecy was not only of death, it was of endurance. He turned to the people. "Shall we end him here, or find a use even for what was bitter?" Bres lifted his head. "Spare me," he begged. "Spare me and I will teach you. The Fomorians know secrets of the earth. When to plough, when to reap, how to cool milk from the cow when grass is thin. Spare me and I will give you this knowledge." Murmurs rippled. Some scoffed. "The tongue of a liar is no gift." Others nodded. Knowledge is a harvest no spear can take away. Ogma stepped forward. Words bind, he said. If he will teach, let him swear in Ogham, carved deep, not spoken lightly. Let his knowledge be his tribute. So they brought wood and stone, and under Ogma's hand, Bres carved his oath, not in honeyed speech, but in strokes that cut and held. He swore to teach the Tuatha the plough's right season, the secrets of milk and seed, the tending of land that feeds without famine. When the last notch was cut, Ogma nodded. This is no king's gift, he said. It is a debtor's due. The Dagda set his hand on the cauldron's rim. Let him live then. Not as lord, not as master, but as one who serves. His crown is broken, his tribute undone. Let his knowledge fill our fields instead. And the people agreed. Mercy tempered by justice, justice tempered by need. In the days that followed, Mag Tuired shifted from battlefield to village. The wounded healed, the dead were sung to cairns, and the plain, though scarred, began to green again under dew. The Dagda's cauldron fed those who rebuilt. The pot boiled with broth that seemed to know who was weary, who was grieving, who needed sweetness in sorrow. And still, it never emptied. Ogma's Ogham spread wider than before. Marks were cut into standing stones at the edge of fields, into door lintels of new houses, into the handles of tools. Not curses, not boasts, but reminders. Enough shared is strength. Memory is wealth. We are many. And Bres, fallen king, spared prisoner, walked among them, teaching. He showed how to guide the plough by the stars, how to choose the right grass for calves, how to churn butter when the cow's milk ran thin. He was watched always, guarded always, but his words were true, and his knowledge filled the people's hands. Some never forgave him. Some spat when he passed, but others, remembering hunger, took what he offered and planted it deep, knowing mercy is not for the guilty alone, but for the future that grows from their ashes. At last, the plain of Mag Tuired was whole enough to leave. The Tuatha returned to their homes, to their hills and rivers, carrying scars and songs in equal measure. The Dagda stood by the cauldron, hand on its rim, and said, "You kept us." Ogma stood by the stones, fingers on the Ogham lines, and said, "You remembered us." And the people, fed by both, whispered the truth they had won. Plenty shared is power kept. The battle is past. The hunger is ended. Justice has been tempered with mercy. And from that mercy, new roots grow. The cauldron is full. The letters are carved. Chapter 10. The Legacy of the Brothers. Ogma's Letters and the Dagda's Plenty. The years after Mag Tuired were quieter, though the memory of battle still slept in the soil. The Tuatha Dé Danann healed, rebuilt, and learned again to live not under tribute, but under plenty. The Dagda's cauldron boiled still, but no longer for soldiers in need of strength alone. It fed weddings, harvest feasts, the long nights of winter when stories kept the dark from gnawing at the door. It was said no guest ever left the Dagda's hall unfed. No child ever slept with an empty stomach. Ogma's letters spread too. What had been marks on slats and stones became a whole forest of memory, carved into boundary posts, grave markers, gifts, and oaths. Children learned their first letters before they learned the heft of a spade, and each stroke was not just sound, but story, a way of remembering, of binding, of making a promise visible. The two brothers grew older, as even gods do. The Dagda's hair silvered like frost on oak, and his belly grew round as a harvest moon. Ogma's hands, once strong as ashwood, grew thin, but his eyes deepened like wells that had seen many skies. They did not fade into silence. The Dagda still stirred his cauldron, though more often he set the ladle in younger hands and sat back with a satisfied grunt. Ogma still carved Ogham, though his strokes were slower, more deliberate, like prayers carved in winter wood. And when children asked, what was the battle like? The brothers did not show them scars or weapons. The Dagda set a bowl in their hands and said, "It was hunger, and we fed it." Ogma pressed a pebble with Ogham into their palms and said, "It was silence, and we gave it words." The children nodded, not fully understanding, but feeling the weight of the answers like stones in their pockets, small now, but certain to be heavy later. In the evenings, when the fire whispered low, the Dagda would take up Una once more. He would play the sorrow tune to rinse the day, the joy tune to stitch the heart, the sleep tune to close the door gently on worry. And Ogma would trace the letters on the table's edge, murmuring the names of trees like an old litany. Birch, rowan, alder, willow, ash. And so word and work, harp and pot, story and stew, fed each other in the hearthlight. Time passed, as it always does, even for gods. And though the Tuatha would one day fade into the hollow hills, their gifts would linger in the world above. The cauldron's promise, that no bowl should go empty when food is shared, became a law stronger than any king's. Long after, farmers told their children, "Leave a spoonful in the pot, so tomorrow remembers today." Ogma's Ogham, carved on stone and tree, became Ireland's script. The lines still visible centuries after men had forgotten whose hands had first carved them. Even when Latin letters came with monks and saints, the Ogham strokes remained, carved into graves, whispering, "We are many." Memory is wealth. Plenty shared is power kept. And so the brothers' legacy lived on, not in thrones, not in crowns, but in every hearth where a pot simmered, in every door lintel marked with Ogham, in every story told slow enough for a child to fall asleep before the ending. The Dagda had given them fullness. Ogma had given them words, and together they had given them endurance. So if ever you hear the whistle of a kettle and smell broth rich with herbs, know that the Dagda's cauldron has not gone cold. If ever your fingers trace old lines on stone and wonder what they mean, know that Ogma's hand still guides yours. And if ever you sit by fire, tired and listening, know that their story still waits to be told again. You've been listening to The Lady Mythos, where forgotten stories breathe again. And so our long journey with the brothers comes to its close. From the quiet of a hearth, to the roar of battle, to the whisper of Ogham on stone, their story has carried us through hunger and plenty, sorrow and joy, prophecy and victory. The Dagda, with his great cauldron, taught that enough is never an accident. It is a promise kept. Ogma, with his words and letters, taught that memory is wealth, and speech can bind us stronger than chains. Together, they gave the Tuatha Dé Danann not only survival, but a way of living. A way that still lingers in island stones, in its stories, in the music of its rivers. So when you next stir a pot, or trace your finger along an old carved mark, perhaps you will feel them near. The Dagda's hand steady on your shoulder, Ogma's voice gentle in your ear. Sleep now, if you like. The brothers keep watch. The pot is full. The letters endure. The story is safe in your hands. If your eyes are still open, let them close now. Sweet dreams. Sleep well, and thank you for listening.